shit astronauts. In 1984, a 26-year-old woman appeared on the beach of Anloga, a coastal town in the Kita district of the Volta region of Ghana, West Africa. When she walked into her family home, her relatives embraced her with joy and confusion. She had been missing 3 years. Her family was full of questions. Why had she vanished? Where had she gone? And what had happened to her in the intervening years? The story the young woman told them left her family worried and confused. The young woman explained that she had been kidnapped while walking on the beach and taken to a community far away where she had been held captive. She had lived among her captives for 3 years and in that time had been forced to bear children. But the most shocking part of the young woman's story was still to come. Her family pressed her to tell them where she had been living, why she hadn't been able to contact them, and who had taken her. Finally, she told them. She had been taken from the beach to an underwater base. The people had taken her in order for her to produce children, and most disturbing of all, the people who had taken her were not human. They were the Mamiwata people.
You can find the Mamiwata tradition all across Africa and into the Caribbean. On first hearing, it sounds like Western stories of mermaids or the ancient Greek stories of the sirens. The Mamiwata people are described as being very beautiful, usually the female, part human and part aquatic, and they abduct people around water. Now, you might think, oh, this just sounds like a cautionary tale warning young men to behave and stay away from the water and stay safe. But the aspect of the mythology that interests me in particular is this narrative of human abductions going back hundreds and maybe thousands of years. Now, what this young lady told her family, she did not tell as a story of convenience. My family, in fact, is just 1 degree removed from that family, and I can tell you that that was not a story she told to help herself. If you think about it, if you return after 3 years with a story like that, it's not going to get you readily accepted. You're not going to get a job. You're not going to get a promotion or any advantage from it. You're more likely to be locked up and medicated. And knowing that, when people are willing to share a story like that, I think it deserves some serious attention. And the fact that this narrative is so wide and goes back so far is one that I think deserves a more careful listen. It's actually part of a much bigger narrative and a far more ancient one. And I'm talking about the Book of Enoch.
The Book of Enoch comprises several works. In the Book of the Watchers, Enoch tells the story of human females being abducted and impregnated by beings who arrive on Earth from their stations in the sky. It goes on to describe the writer's journeys through the cosmos, discovering truths previously hidden from humanity concerning other dimensions. The Book of Parables speaks more of Enoch's journeys and speaks of God's judgment of the Watchers and plans for humanity. It holds out the promise of a heavenly Messiah. In the Book of Heavenly Luminaries, Enoch is shown around the galaxy as an entity called Uriel instructs him in astronomy and the laws of the cosmos. The Book of Enoch's accounts of interstellar travel are not the only narratives of ET contact in the Hebrew tradition. The prophet Ezekiel also reported an experience of being picked up in a flying craft. In his experience, a human-like pilot flies him around various cities of ancient Iraq before finally depositing him in Tel Aviv.
The Book of Ezekiel is an example of what's known as apocalyptic literature. And that's where the writer has seen or experienced something really bizarre, and they simply describe what they saw and experienced for the reader to try and work out what it means, because they know it means something.
In the past, Bible scholars have assumed that Ezekiel was describing a vision, but might the author have been describing something real and material, something that today we would call an alien abduction?
Ezekiel does not report this as a vision. He talks about it in very concrete terms. He tells us where he was when he was picked up, where he was flown over in Iraq, where he was dropped off in Tel Aviv, and what state he was in when he was dropped off. And it's kind of amusing, really, because all the time he's being flown around, the pilot, and he describes the pilot as he was like a human being. The pilot is trying to talk to him about religion and politics. Ezekiel is completely distracted. He's looking around at the craft he's being flown in, and he's thinking, how does this thing work? This metal is amazing. And the glass, he's never seen anything like it, so he describes it as a crystal canopy. How do these wheels work, he's thinking? And what's that roaring noise that happens right behind us every time we move? So he's completely fascinated by this craft that he calls the glory. It's a bit silly of us to read that and say, oh no, that was just a vision. Ezekiel doesn't say it was, and it's a bit silly of us to say we know better than him what he was describing. I think when we dismiss it and say it was a vision, we're really doing to Ezekiel what we do to all returnees and think we know better than what they're describing. We sort of put our fingers in our ears as soon as there's anything like an ET element because it offends our worldview. The worldview that says we're alone in the universe, we've never been visited. End of story.
The Book of Enoch describes in dramatic detail a period in which 200 watchers arrive on planet Earth and began abducting human females. With these women, the watchers produce hybrid beings who are human in form, but far larger than normal human beings. Mythologies around the world corroborate the Book of Enoch's account of abductions by an extraterrestrial presence exiled on planet Earth. Although quoted in the New Testament letter of Jude and accepted as scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the Book of Enoch has never been included in the internationally accepted canons of scripture for either Judaism or Christianity.
The fact that the Book of Enoch isn't one of the canonical books of the Bible, I don't think is particularly important. Clement of Alexandria, among other church fathers, quoted it as scripture. And the narrative that it holds is really an unpacking of narratives you can find referenced all through the Bible. You can find it in Genesis, Ezekiel, and in the Gospels and New Testament. It's story of 200 watchers coming and interbreeding with human beings and producing giants. That's a narrative that's in the Bible, and you can go all around the world and it repeats in mythologies from every culture. You can find it in the Mesoamerican story. You can find it in African stories. You can go to Greece, go to India, go to the Nordic countries. You can go anywhere on the planet. And that story of abductions and interbreeding with another kind of being that came from the sky repeats over and over again.
Author and researcher Paul Wallace probes the world's ancient mythologies for clues about the origins of the human race, and has published several books in the field of mysticism and spirituality. In the last decade, his work has probed the world's ancient mythologies for the insights they hold on our origins as a species and our potential as human beings. Paul's work in church ministry has included training pastors in the interpretation of biblical texts, working as a troubleshooter for communities of faith, and serving as an archdeacon in the Anglican Church in Australia. His background as a senior churchman makes it all the more surprising that Paul's latest book argues that human origins lie in our prehistoric contact with extraterrestrial species. Go to www.paulanthonywallace.com for information about Paul and his books. You can find Paul on the Paul Wallace channel on YouTube, also linked below. Ancient astronauts